everyone. Sorry we're a few minutes late. I'm just getting the hang of this, and sometimes there are technical issues, and Dr. Ron and I figured it out finally after 17 minutes of trying to get on here live with you. I'm very honored and happy to introduce Dr. Ron today, all the way from Brooklyn, New York. He's been working treacherously hard over the past few months. He always works hard, but I think especially now with this COVID-19 pandemic has thrusted his work into a new paradigm shift. And it is an absolute honor and privilege that you took this time on your one day off to get on live with us and converse with us about all the things that are happening in reality for you in New York with this health crisis you are basically a servant to, and we are so grateful to have you on. I'd like for you to just quickly introduce yourself before we dive into these very important questions that we have lined up to find out a bit more of what's happening in New York with this global pandemic that is happening and affecting all of us, each in our own ways. Dr. Ron.
Thank you so much for having me, Chandanni, and thank you, everybody. It is exciting for me to be here. I am affiliated with the New York Presbyterian Hospital Group, and I am a neonatologist taking care of tiny newborn babies. I'm also the assistant director of the newborn intensive care unit at my hospital and associate professor of pediatrics. Luckily, this year I'm chairman of the Physician Health Committee, and that will bring us to a little bit of discussion of mindfulness and meditation, which might be needed during this pandemic. And yes, this is a very difficult situation for everybody. We are right in the thick of it in Brooklyn, New York. It's been unbelievably challenging, but there are some beautiful, positive, incredibly wonderful things coming out of it, which gives us a lot of hope for the future. And the best thing I could tell you at this stage here in New York is that we saw the peak last week and the week before that, and we seem to be coming down, which is something I am absolutely incredibly grateful for. So even though it's still very severe, we are seeing far lesser numbers this week than we did last week and the week after. This is a huge global humanitarian crisis, especially affecting us in the United States, very significantly more so in New York, but there is room for positivity and hope that we shall overcome this.
Dr. Ron, that's it's encouraging to hear from you that the crisis does seem to be leveling off in New York and the numbers are coming down, and to have that as hard evidence data from a medical professional, medical institution is very reassuring. There are so many conflicting information sources out there, both from the scientific industry and conspiracy theories and politics and you name it, it's out there. I'd like for you to share with us firsthand a little bit about what you've observed over the last couple of months since the inception of this pandemic, and what is the reality of what's going on with people getting sick and how this is affecting the hospitals in New York City especially, and how it's affected your practice today.
Yes. We are facing a very dire situation, which again, as you rightly said, is beginning to get better. There is a lot of suffering and a lot of death happening. It's heartbreaking to see the large freezer trucks outside the hospitals. The hospital morgues are full and there is not even enough place for the bodies, and many of the hospitals had to rent these large trucks in order to temporarily store the bodies. So it's very heartrending. Even when we drive close to this hospital, the one I work in, or the ones around, it's absolutely heartbreaking to see these large freezer trucks standing out, and parts of them are covered with plastic so that, you know, it's not visible to everybody where the bodies are being put into these trucks. So it's unbelievably, I would like to use the word horrible, but I would say it's unbelievably terrible. I can't even find words to describe what we are going through here. The other part of the suffering is that the people who are dying cannot be close to their near and dear ones. And the doctors and the nurses and the respiratory therapists and all the medical personnel are trying to even like FaceTime so that they can be with the people who love them. And these are things which are unimaginable. Never thought that it would happen here in this country. 3 months ago, we were in an entirely different world. And now the situation is absolutely, absolutely very different. Again, I would preface it by saying that I am very, very, very thankful, and all of us are, that it's beginning to look like it is getting better. On a positive side, you know, being right at the frontier, dealing with moms who are COVID positive, delivering their little babies, and therefore being at the front line in touch with people who are affected by it, I've noticed a couple of very gratifying things which brings up again the hope in humanity. I would like to quote Rabindranath Tagore, who was an Indian poet and Nobel laureate, and incidentally, it is his birthday today, Chandanni. And so what he said was, every child that is born unto this earth brings with it the message that God is not yet tired of man. And I feel that there is hope. I feel that there is still this basic compassion, this basic love in all of us human beings right now. And this is being tested to the maximum. So I have noticed some beautiful things happening in support of whatever is going on and helping, right, both at the community level as well as at the individual level with the healthcare workers and everybody present out here. So yes, a lot of suffering happening, but room for a lot of hope in the midst of all of this.
Doctor, it's fascinating because your practice, your profession, your expertise, your work has a lot to do with dealing with crisis, neonatal crisis, emergency situations for mums, and the care of premature babies, and making sure that they survive. So you're sort of in this emergency realm of work, but to add on top of it the uncertainty and insecurity and horrific nature of this virus on top of everything else must be putting so much pressure on you. And I wanted to ask you, I know that you're not exactly, your specialty is not virology, but from your background and from your medical training and from your experience, what strikes you as very, very unusual with regards to the COVID-19 virus and its impact, its severe impact that has basically halted the world today, as opposed to other viruses that have occurred like SARS and MERS in the past that never had this dramatic effect on the entire world to come to a place of such severity? What do you think is the unusual factor in the unknowingness of what this virus is and how it operates that's affecting us globally in this way?
I think we are facing an enemy, a submicroscopic enemy, cannot even be seen with a regular compound microscope. It needs an electron microscope. We are facing a tiny submicroscopic enemy, and we are trying very hard to overcome its effects. The big thing is, firstly, we are encountering something that we have never encountered before. It's a brand new virus. Secondly, the infectivity is very high. Thirdly, the transmission is through different kinds of route, through the aerosol, through the coughing, as well as the airway secretions and droplets, as well as through fomites, which means that it can be stored on surfaces or it can preserve itself on surfaces for a little bit of a while. So a new organism, high infectivity, and various methods of transmission are probably among the three most important things which are making it something which we have never faced before and is a challenge to the world. I would say that one of the very wise people in a talk a few weeks ago. His name is Swami Sarvapriyananda. He is actually one of the monks at the Vivekananda Center or the Ramakrishna Mission in New York City. He said it very nicely. He said that when we face a crisis, it is like being hit with two arrows. The first arrow, and he's actually paraphrasing the Bhagavad Gita, which is the sacred Indian text, which was related by Lord Krishna to a commander-in-chief, Arjuna, many millennia ago. And this is not a cool text you read when you're calm and relaxed. All this has happened in the middle of a battlefield. So we are right there again now. So what he said is that whenever we are faced with this kind of a problem, there are the two arrows. The first is the real problem itself, which is the global pandemic that we are facing with this death, this suffering, this destruction caused by the presence of this virus and by its infectivity. So the first arrow is the direct trauma caused by the virus itself. But the second arrow is our internal trauma, which is caused by our response and our suffering to this virus, you know. And we have to deal with both of these arrows. The first arrow has to be dealt with by, as you very rightly put it, looking at science as we know it now. There are so many sources out there. There are so many people talking different languages, telling different things. The last thing we need at this stage is unbelievable confusion and not knowing what to do. In these cases, it's best to follow a solid, scientific, reliable source at this moment. We can always backtrack once this war is done and look at what things went wrong, whatever was wrong or right. But in this case, it's good to follow the guidelines which are put out there on a very regular basis at a state level, as well as at the federal level through the Center for Disease Control, as well as through the state recommendations. No matter we feel they are terribly right or terribly wrong, it's good to have one source at least till we finish this problem. So the first arrow needs to be faced through that. This is like a newborn resuscitation. You know, when I have a premature baby, some of my babies are so tiny. I have my iPhone, the latest one out here with a very cool camera, and it's very exciting for me to take pictures from there. But the thing is, some of my babies are not bigger than the size of this iPhone. And when I am called to the delivery room or operating room to resuscitate the baby with my team, at that time as the team lead, I would tell my team that let me be the only person who is directing this resuscitation at this moment for this baby with no heart rate, not breathing, because typically we have those 5 golden minutes. Not even 5, I mean, some people would say 2 to 3 golden minutes to put a breathing tube into a tiny baby. The baby is this tiny. The breathing tube is like a millimeter, like a millimeter and a half in diameter. The vocal cords through which the breathing tube needs to go is barely like a millimeter. This requires the ultimate focus, concentration, and meditation. And this is multitasking in the middle of this crisis with a baby with no heart rate, because my team needs to start chest compressions. One of my team would need to drop the medications. So the worse the situation, the calmer you have to be. But I do tell my team before I go in for resuscitating this baby with no heart rate to try to get the heart rate back, is that if you feel the orders are right at this stage that I'm giving as the team lead, do not question them unless you feel that I am making a mistake. And then please feel free to stop me and correct me. But if not, then we should proceed with the resuscitation if it is little things here and there, and we can always debrief later. And you know the most incredible thing about this resuscitation, on a little aside with newborn babies, one of the most incredible things that you can see is this beautiful spark of joy in a mother's eyes. When you are given this baby with no heart rate, not breathing, and you give it back to her, alive, pink, crying, and that mom will give you that one look before she snatches the baby from you. This is a look of utter surrender and gratitude. That look is worth all the 15 years that I spent going to medical school, doing my residency, doing my fellowship in newborn medicine. That one look is worth everything, all the blood, sweat, and tears that you put in, not because there is any ego or arrogance that, oh, I feel cool, I've saved a baby's life, but just the feeling that I am able to be of service to a mother and bring a spark of joy in her eyes. So going back to your question, I feel that at this stage, we need to look at the guidelines by the CDC, adhere to them, see what is happening, and just follow them. That will make it the easiest at this stage. And that includes everything, including social distancing, including all of the recommendations. There will be time later when we have overcome this for us to reevaluate where things did not go the right way and many things haven't at various levels, and to evaluate what's going on. But at this stage, we are right in the midst of this war. So take a source, a scientific source, which is very reliable, and right now follow it. So this is for the arrow, which is the external arrow, which we can definitely face with everything that is happening, looking at science. The internal arrow, our response to how we are facing this situation, needs to be faced with inner calm. What's very, very important is to be able to be of help to other people in this crisis, but not have the arrogance that I am helping. And Chandanni, this is so interesting because we felt the shortage of N95 masks, which are the masks which are a part of the PPE, basically the equipment, personal protective equipment, which helps us to not get the virus when we are treating people suffering from it. And initially there was a shortage of it. So I put up an appeal on my Facebook page saying, please guys, help us, Yes, everybody's trying their best. We will eventually have it. But in the meantime, give us some PPE, give me those masks. And you have no idea how people in the community came together to help out. Oh my God. There are these incredible people. There's this wonderful, wonderful artist who lives in Brooklyn, who is a part of an organization she put together. Wonderful people in California, wonderful people in Manhattan, Staten Island, everywhere. They started getting in touch with me and mailing me these masks. And I had like 300 of them in 1 week. And if they couldn't do it, what was so beautiful was even at an individual level, people I didn't know, mind you, these are not people that, I'm cool friends with. They said, I ordered 5 masks from Walgreens a little bit before the crisis. I'm using 2, but I do have 3 and I'm going to mail you this. So right from a little UPS and FedEx packages of 3 masks to 300 masks, and we could help the people in our respiratory therapy department, me and my team, and the labor and delivery. This was so beautiful. And the coolest thing, this is what touched me so much. This lady got in touch with me from Staten Island, and she said, Dr. Ron, you don't know me. I had a baby in an intensive care unit, not at your hospital. I don't have any of these masks, but I can stitch you beautiful cloth masks, which you can wear over your N95, so you can reuse those masks. And would you like those? I said, yes, absolutely. And she ended up stitching these beautiful cloth masks, which she mailed to me and which I took to my intensive care unit. They're beautiful colors, little smiley faces which go on. So it's been so unbelievably gratifying that the community has come together. This is something which is very human and very basic, this love and compassion, which is present in all of us. And it totally bolstered my view of humanity. Just like Rabindranath Tagore, who began by quoting him, said, there is a lot of hope still for mankind. There is innate love and compassion in all of us. So at a community level, I feel that we are still really nicely coming together with positivity, with hope, and helping other people. So I feel that we can deal with, going back to your question about coping with this, by dealing with helping people, as much as we can in whatever capacity we can, but also without any ego or arrogance. And this is the part where we need to work on ourselves, because a lot of people are stuck home, with not a lot to do, a lot of working from home. It is very frustrating being indoors when the human spirit wants to go out and to explore. And I think working on ourselves is so important, because you don't want the mind to be empty and go into a negative feedback mechanism, So because we talk so much of love and compassion, it also needs to begin with self-love and self-compassion. And That can be done through various techniques like regular exercise, yoga, pranayam, which is the breathing practice, which is very powerful actually in increasing the blood oxygenation and the acid-base balance, and it might actually increase our immunity, which is very exciting for me because I ended up writing a book with my dad very recently, which got published as a download all over the world, as well as it's published in India. So internationally, it's an ebook download. It's on the benefits of pranayam. It's the first book of its kind with both of us. This is not to give a plug for the book, but to say that during this time, I think breathing practices and working on ourselves through pranayam, which is breathing meditation, as much as exercise. And I would say also reducing the cell phone use. So many times, believe me, we look at the cell phone every few seconds, even when you're sitting there. I'm partly guilty. See, I have my cell phone next to me right now. But this is for troubleshooting, I guess, whatever you might need to communicate with me, which might not happen through Facebook. But we should really go away from that unless we are on call at the hospital or unless you feel you are going to get an urgent message from somebody. Keep it away, switch it off at night if you can. And one more thing, and maybe at some point we will talk if there is an opportunity for it at the Neuroscience of Love and Compassion, is to keep positive company and avoid negative company if you can now, you know. Avoiding negative company also includes stopping looking at the news every few minutes, which many of us are reflexively doing. I try to see the first 10 headlines everywhere in every well-known newspaper online. Every one of them is horrible and negative, and it like takes away your faith in humanity. You know, there are, you know, Chandanni, there are beautiful things happening at an individual level. I've seen this on the mountains. I've been lucky enough to go on Mount Everest 4 times and be a mountaineer, and I have seen acts of selflessness and beauty right out there. And I have seen beautiful selfless acts happen right now in my hospital and whatever it is to help people. So I would say avoid negativity. Maybe have about 4 or 5 times in a day, maybe 4 times in a day, that you check the news and then go away from it after that. Just read a good book and keep the company of like-minded positive people, which will really make you go away feeling good. Not the feeling good of like this false sense of reassurance, but feeling good of having like people who are optimistic, positive, but who are also realistic. So I would say these are many ways in which we can counter these incredible challenges we are facing, and hopefully will help us face both the outer arrow with the COVID situation and the suffering, and the internal arrow with our response to it. And I'm going to end this live. Sorry, I have been speaking so much that I'm not even been giving you a time to talk here. But one of my heroes is Viktor Frankl, you know, and he was a psychiatrist in Austria and one of the survivors of Auschwitz concentration camp. He was asked, he was one of the few people who walked out alive, and he was asked, how could you walk out alive through all of this? You saw your dad, your mom, your wife, your children being killed in front of you. How are you still internally intact? And what Victor said is that between every stimulus and response, there is this space. In this space, we have the power to give out our response. And in that type of response would lie our growth and freedom. So that choice is ours. We cannot control what happens to us. We cannot control what is around us. But how we respond to it is 100% under our control. And if we respond to it out of love and compassion and understanding and courage, therein lies our growth and freedom. And I'm going to give it back to you. Sorry, I think I spoke a lot, but this is a topic which is very emotional for me because we are right in the middle of this crisis. But I think there's room to be positive and optimistic. Back to you, Chandanni.
No, it's making me understand that nature has a very, very supreme interaction and supreme call with us as a humanity, and that life is essentially insecure and spontaneous, and it makes me acknowledge even deeper and even further the evolution of Ayurveda, which is the natural healing science of India, which is our grandmother of all healing modalities, both allopathic and alternative, and to recognize that the evolutionary aspect of who we are as individuals and who we are as a planet has been pushed into this climactic force right now. And as you so beautifully expounded on the relationship of Arjuna and Krishna, bringing Arjuna into the battlefields and questioning the crisis of two arrows being shot at you at the same time, which is sort of a metaphor of what is happening for us right now globally, and individually and unit-wise, on all capacities, from our physicality to our economy to our global cultures to our politics. There's a global climactic intersection happening with all these arrows coming at us. And like you so beautifully explained, there's an external arrow and an internal arrow for us to have to face ourselves and to redefine wellness in our own lives with what we have available to us, which is the call of the practice of consciousness, meditation, Ayurveda, and physiology, basically. So understanding this nature of the climax that we're living in today, what are you most afraid of? Or is there absolutely no fear in your practice as a medical professional today, or your practice as a human being today? Is there any kind of reservation or fear you have that could potentially make this crisis worse, other than people not listening to the CDC and the social distancing and the things that can help us get through this? Is there anything bigger than that that you're afraid of?
That's a very good question. And I have not ever been asked that before in my various times that I have come on podcast for the pandemic. And yes, I will preface this with an example here. There was a king many years ago, and he was a very pious king, a very wonderful king. He did a lot for his kingdom. And then came a time when the kingdom was affected by a plague. This is several centuries ago. It's a beautiful mythological story. Then the king meditated, saying, I want to alleviate the suffering. There is so much of problem present around, and I want to help out. And then the god of death, in Indian mythology, his name is Yama. So the god of death appeared before the king and said, what do you want? You are a very good king, and I am going to try and help you out in this situation. And the king said, yes, the plague has come into my kingdom. It's killing so many people. Can I ask you to limit the number of deaths and suffering which is happening because of this plague? And the god of death said, absolutely, yes. What do you want me to do? He said, well, I know that many millions of people might potentially die. If you can restrict the number of deaths to just 1,000 people, I would be very grateful. I mean, we are picking and choosing here, but rather than go into like tens of thousands. The god of death says, you are a good king? Absolutely. No problem at all. I will listen to you. God of death went away. 2 weeks passed. And he appeared again before the king. And the king said, you lied to me. And the god of death said, why? What happened? And the king said, you promised me 1,000 people will die in this pandemic of the plague that is happening in my kingdom. 50,000 people died. Why did you lie to me so much? And the god of death looked at the king and said, your majesty, because of the pandemic, by the actual disease itself, I took the lives of only 1,000 people. The remaining 49,000 people died just due to fear. And we need to not be afraid. Yes, we need to be afraid enough to stick to guidelines, of course, right? We need to have enough care and concern for ourselves and others that we practice everything that is advocated by the CDC, including masks, including social distancing, whatever, whether we feel it right or wrong at this stage. Right now, there's the only path to follow the science. So let us do that, but let us not be scared. And the techniques that I had advised before with the yoga, pranayam, meditation, apart from using science, would help us to be internally strong as well as externally strong. So the presence of fear itself is something which we need to try to overcome. The more scared we are at a scientific level, more our steroids start being pumped as a part of the fight and flight reaction. And therefore, the more our immunity starts to come down. And the more our immunity starts to come down, the more portals there are at entry for this virus. And so let us be worried enough that we are able to give of ourselves to ourselves and other people and practice all of the guidelines being recommended. But let us not be so scared that we are losing it. I know it is easier said than done. I mean, I face it every day, even before the days of the pandemic, with tiny babies, with no heartbeat, no breathing. So I would tell you right from there that the only way out is to take a deep breath. Yes, fill yourself with self-love and self-compassion. Do not have this debilitating fear as much as you can. And again, you can do it through proper exercise, through the pranayam, through the meditation, through just enjoying beautiful art and music and keeping positive company. And it is not one way or the other. In life, I have learned through being a critical care physician that nothing is binary. It is never 0 or 1. It is always a middle path. It's always a middle path. We have advanced so much in science and technology. It would be kind of simplistic and not very wise to not take advantage of this incredible science, this incredible technology that modern medicine has afforded us. And these beautiful cures, like acute lymphoid leukemia in a child, has an over 95% cure rate with chemotherapy. So it would be so wrong to not make use of this when the cure rate is incredible. Having said that, there are many times where we have diseases, we have like psoriasis, we have so many cutaneous conditions, skin conditions, so many conditions which are psychosomatic. And in these, where we don't have a definite cure, it is really good to explore the other means, Ayurveda, homeopathy, acupuncture, acupressure. There are so many out there, and the freedom is ours to explore out. So yes, make use of science, make use of technology, absolutely make use of modern medicine as we have it now. But there are many things for which there is no answer to these, and therein explore the other options as well. So it's always a middle path where you make the best use of everything out there and not go polarized in one direction or the other. And if you wish, I could give you just a very real life example of what we faced in the newborn intensive care unit, which speaks about this middle path. Because, you know, no matter how I talk, all of us are great talkers, especially in the West here. We love to talk. And the most important thing really is to do things, work on ourselves. Sometimes silence as well as introspection is the best medicine rather than being a glib talker. So some of the best things I believe are by dint of example. So we had this baby in the intensive care unit. The mom was COVID positive, and so she could not see this baby. Little boy, close to full term, so not really a premature baby, but with extremely immature lungs. And this boy was struggling for his life in the intensive care unit. And one of the most heartbreaking things for me and my team was that the mother could not be close to what we thought was a dying baby at that time. We were losing heart rate, we were losing the breathing. This baby was on highest doses of medications to keep the heart breathing on the most advanced ventilators. We are a level 5 or level 4 intensive care unit, which means we have the most advanced technology out there to save lives at my hospital. So we were using full technology and seeing that life was still ebbing away. And the most heartbreaking thing was that for this little baby, we could not have mommy sit next to the baby and hold his hand. We called the chaplain. We have a 24-hour chaplain available at the hospital who is on call 24 hours, and she came in. She had this conversation. All the conversations were updates that I'm giving on the phone to this mother because she could not be next to him. And we call in the chaplain, which is not always done, but many times done, which I feel was probably the most correct step in this case, because the chaplain, she came in, wonderful, wonderful, compassionate person. The moment she walked into the neonatal ICU, you could feel this love and compassion coming from her heart. She spoke to the mom on the phone, and the mom requested her, could you do a few things that I used to do to the baby when he was in my womb? And the chaplain said yes. Then she said, could you read him this beautiful poetry, which I used to read to him? I cannot be next to him, but you can. If you don't mind sitting next to him, reading these stories. She gave a list of the stories she used to read out to the baby when he was in the womb, the poems. And she said, if you could do that, and the prayers that she used to read to him, and if you could do that, I would be very grateful. So for several hours, with not a care for herself. Remember, I mean, we are all exposing ourselves in this situation to whatever is out there. The chaplain, dressed in, of course, a full mask, gown, and gloves, sat next to this little boy and read to him these beautiful stories that the mom used to read to him when he was in the womb. These lovely poems, these lovely prayers. And Chandanni, you won't believe it, an hour passed, 2 hours passed. The heart still did not stop. The oxygen levels were still steady. And then the baby started turning the corner that night. Heart rate started coming back up. The oxygen levels started improving. I am not saying that this is just because of storytelling. Yes, of course, you know, science and technology was playing a role at that time. Having said that, I have a feeling also that the baby went back into the womb. You know, what happens is when we are a fetus, we have the amygdala, which is what is the primitive brain. It determines our fight and flight response, and that starts recording very soon after the baby is conceived, right? So I think the baby went back to a very safe place into himself, listening to these beautiful poems, because it brought back the time that all these messages were being relayed. This is that I'm trying to put this as much scientifically as possible. And I think definitely it helped. So yes, combination of science, technology, but this beautiful love, compassion, as this chaplain started reading out these beautiful stories. And Chandanni, not only the baby, as we heard this beautiful, calm voice in the intensive care unit, all of us doctors, nurses, respiratory therapists, we started feeling this beautiful calm inside us. Everybody came peeping in to watch the baby's monitors in this isolation room, because the baby was under isolation, of course. And we are all looking in incredibly pleasant surprise at all the heart rate, the breathing starting to come up. This was something very beautiful, which exemplifies not only the role of science and technology, but also this beautiful human moment, which we are capable of sharing with others. The mom could not see this baby for 2 weeks, because that is the time frame which is recommended for a symptomatic mom with COVID. And what is incredible is that the baby did survive that night. He continued to do reasonably well. And it was so wonderful. A few days ago, 2 weeks had passed, and mommy could be next to this little boy, just holding him close to her. There is still a long way to go. He is not out of the woods yet, but it was so beautiful to have mommy next to the baby. So yes, science, yes, definitely technology, but at the same time, the role of love and compassion in this case, I feel played an equally important role in making things happen. So I would say never underestimate our inner strength, never underestimate as living beings, as sentient beings, this incredible positive energy that we have, which is as important as what is happening outside. So very long-winded answer to your question, but the most important thing is to trust in ourselves and to know that we can do it and not lose hope.
Wow. I mean, that's when, you know, the definition of a miracle is when unprecedented facts come together and create a totally unexpected transformation and paradigm shift, especially when it comes to a health crisis based logically and specifically in tested and tried medicine. And I think that's where the gift of Ayurveda comes in as a living, evolving science, is that no faction in our lives, no faction, no facet, no one singular point of view is isolated unto itself, that the total sum of the parts makes the whole. And the future of mankind, in order to evolve and heal, has to be integrative, has to be reciprocal, has to be explored and united on all fronts. So what you speak of here so beautifully, with this unusually creative exploration of one incident that created something unexpected for medical professionals that have done situations like this, have been in situations like this again and again, still you're left in awe when somebody comes in and simply reads a poem and allows this small, tiny being to heal itself ultimately. And I know that there's this word adaptogenic that has come into alternative medicine and allopathic medicine, that there are certain ingredients, certain tools, certain mechanisms that can be introduced into a system, to a being, so that the body will naturally identify what it needs. And through the association of that newly introduced ingredient or tool or practice or solution that's being offered, the body triggers its own natural pharmacy to kick into gear, and the body heals itself. So understanding this mystical nature of our physiology, our psychology, and it makes me understand this conversation we're having together, that love and compassion are actually not adjectives. These are verbs. These are sources of energy, vibrations, and brings it into the aspect of physics and energy and the quality of how we operate and how we reverberate on a cellular level, which I think is what the new medical science is also exploring today, correct?
You are absolutely right, and you put it very nicely, because in the path that we explore towards our journey of self-discovery, because ultimately we need to know about ourselves in order to know the world and know how to face the world. And one of my role models since I was a kid has been my dad, he is an atomic scientist. And many decades ago, even before I was born, he introduced yoga and meditation, which are all parts of many traditional systems, including and specifically Ayurveda, to the scientific community in Mumbai, India. And he proved, just with the practice of meditation for a short while in the day, he proved after a year that productivity went up around 65% and conflict came down 80% through all of this. So absolutely, it is so important to use these pathways to work on ourselves. And it was incredible for me, therefore, to be surrounded by these books, and all of these texts, including Autobiography of a Yogi, including books on Ramana Maharshi, and these incredibly beautiful, enlightened people. One of them, Swami Shivananda, was a medical doctor. So many of them. So it was so cool to just be surrounded by this energy of those books. Not that I was a very diligent meditator when I was a kid, and as a teenager, I was very naughty, very rambunctious, and at times very shy and very introverted. God knows what happened now to me, unfortunately. But what was incredible, at least I feel that even the presence of these wonderful things makes it a very positive experience through childhood. And of course, the presence of my mom, who is a mathematician, but she is also the quiet energy in the house, doesn't talk much, unlike me and partly my dad, but more so like me. But in her quietness, she makes everything happen very positively around, and just this quiet, supportive nature at the back. So I've been very lucky to have that. So it's really wonderful to look at the effect that all of this has, which is what evoked my interest in the science of meditation. One can hear an ambulance in the background, and I would tell you it's so wonderful because these noises, these sounds were so frequent even just 2 weeks ago, and they're much less now. These are all the sick patients being being transported to the hospitals around me, and now it's so much more reassuring that these sirens are a little bit less than they were 2 weeks ago. So we digress there, but just to point that out. And so this evoked my interest in traditional systems of medicine, apart from practicing, of course, neuroscience and allopathic medicine as a neonatologist. And it led to me to do a research project in the Himalayas, including the Mount Everest region, to look at the effect of meditation on the human body, including neurocognitive function studies. So it's been really a beautiful journey. And this is what resulted in the book, because I told my dad the knowledge should not go away with us ultimately leaving the earth. It has to be out there. And so I said, if you are willing to write the book of the practice, I will try to write about the science behind it. So it was a dream of 5 years come true when the book finally came out. And in that, as you very rightly said, we look at all of the meditation, the breathing, but I look at the acid-base balance, and even at a cellular level, look at the ATP and the changes in the energy production, which happens through all of this. So this is, as far as medicine goes, it is again a middle path. But also the second part of what you said, and I would absolutely support that unequivocally, is the immense power of love and compassion, that we have in our heart, to such an extent that we have a program at our hospital, which is currently on hold because of the COVID situation, called the Baby Cuddler Program, where we have the volunteer cuddlers to come in, just cuddle, hold these little tiny premature babies close to them and cuddle and play with them. They get, of course, training in how to handle a premature baby, as well as consent from the parents that we would have the cuddlers involved, of course. And there is absolutely incredible evidence from my alma mater at Brown University in Rhode Island, as well as many of the other large institutions, that the cuddled babies who are just cuddled with this love and compassion have much more immunity, have a shorter stay in the newborn intensive care unit, have far lesser complications, and even as teenagers, they're far better balanced than the non-cuddled ones. And so love, compassion, and kindness is a definite physical energy. Apart from my favorite, the Beatles, John Lennon saying, all you need is love. I'm sure he knew it, because he was a very wise man, that he meant it in more ways than one. And my major being neuroscience in my research at Brown, I love to look at the science behind everything that is out there if I can. So the phenomenon is explained by a neuroscience perspective by something called neural Wi-Fi. So if you're kind, if you're loving, if you're compassionate, this Wi-Fi radiates out from your brain and starts affecting the other people around, even without us having the arrogant intention that I'm going to talk and convert this person to what I think is right. You don't need to do that. Just begin with self-love and self-compassion, and it will radiate out to the others. It's like the Dalai Lama gave a very beautiful example a couple decades ago. He said that trying to help other people when we can't help ourselves or haven't focused on helping ourselves is like a vessel only half filled with water. All the vessel does, if the water is very less, is just make lots and lots of noise, but not really like quench the thirst of the people around us. So maybe we need to take a deep breath, take a step back, fill ourselves up with the water of self-love and self-compassion, let it radiate out, and automatically the thirst of everybody around us is quenched. So there is a lot of neuroscience behind love and compassion, including the school neural Wi-Fi and everything else happening around. So what you said, it's really wonderful. It has a lot of basis of science also behind it. And again, it is a middle path, listening to the science, listening to the technology, listening to modern medicine out there, doing all the right investigations and the right tests, coming to certain conclusions, and then knowing that if there are alternative branches which will definitely be effective, then I feel it would be very arrogant of us to ever say that my way is the only right way. There are so many ways out there, and it is so important to pursue what we feel our heart and soul tells us, and the experts tell us around us that it might be the best way.
Beautiful. This is truly the new intelligence of our time, to be integrative, to include, to consider, to reconsider, to redesign. And the nature of life is dynamic and evolutionary. It's never static. As soon as, they did those beautiful experiments on water and the energy around water and how the cells of water move just with the vibration of sound alone, and to understand that everything is based on nature, which is the first law of thermodynamics. Every child is taught this at a very young age, but to really build on that and to integrate that and imbibe that understanding existentially, and to know that every choice we make, every action we include or leave behind contributes to the greater environment, the greater world around us. And it has to start with ourselves. And I think wellness practitioners, both in the medical industry and in the alternative industry, have a huge responsibility right now and an accountability to not only share this and teach this and practice this towards other people and their community, but to also live this, which I think is a new understanding, which is a new shift in our lives today, is to really be that which you understand to be true. To, if you speak about neuroscience and meditation, to actually practice that and live that and imbibe that, as you say, a human being that is radiant and intact and whole and balanced need not even do anything. Simply the nature of their presence in silence can heal and affect and contribute so much to so many. So I thank you for technically and scientifically and creatively explaining to us and sharing with us the importance of where science meets consciousness today, where the global pandemic is also inviting us to look inside and heal, and also introducing us to such real unity, such real beauty that is happening. Because I think that it was interesting when you said the thing that I fear the most is that people will be afraid, because that in itself will create more devastation. So I value your opinion about that, and I take that to heart, and I will include that in my own engagements from now on to reinforce the self-love and the compassion and the practices to move us into fearlessness. That is such a real feeling, it's such a real emotion that has a very destructive force, especially on our immune system from a physiological standpoint. I just want to wrap up this beautiful conversation with one last question to you. I know that you've achieved so much in your life thus far, and you're so humble about it, and you're very childlike, which makes me respect you even more. My last question to you for this session is that what is your ultimate hope and dream for the modern world today? What is the path that you're carving? What do you, when you go to sleep at night, with all the work you've done, with everything that you see, with everything that you serve, everything that you learn continually, what is your dream for mankind today? If you can explain it in a few short sentences, because I know you don't like to tell people how they should be. Of course, that's the higher path. But how do you see the world evolving? What is your ultimate goal that keeps you going every single day in your life and your work?
I was meditating, just to preface it, at this beautiful place in South India called Thiruvannamalai, where this incredible man called Ramana Maharshi, I actually have his pendant on me here. He died in 1950, and he was I feel one of the most enlightened people around. All his teaching was in silence. He never had any initiation, never an active teacher. People just felt the presence of his company and this beautiful positivity in their heart. He said the greatest change that you can render into the world is to change yourself. So the most important thing is to have an internal path. Having said that, I think the most important thing is to continue to be of service to other people. And it's so wonderful for all of us. I think a lot of us are already there in helping other people and being there for other people. And this is where the world needs to go, to not divide our mind into narrow domestic walls, to break these barriers, break these boundaries, and realize that it's just one beautiful field, one beautiful force in the universe that's encompassing all of us. And the greatest pathway through this is through love and compassion. And you know, Chani, the most incredible thing I feel is that once people understand that being a sentient being and having love and compassion will make them superheroes, make them super powerful. It's just like a little baby. I'll tell you why. And you said it very nicely that yes, it's a modern science, a new science, but also it is a very old science because we all know it innately. We have known this for several millennia, and we are only rediscovering the absolute truths which were present. It's like a tiny little baby, right? So if I ever feel like I'm having a bad day and that, oh, the world needs to change, so many things are negative in this world, all I have to do is take rounds in the intensive care unit, look into this incubator at this little baby. And even if this baby might have a breathing tube, might have IVs in him or her, the moment they turn 4 or 5 weeks old, they start smiling. This big, beautiful smile lights up their face. And the reason for that is that they're born with innate joy and happiness. That is our human nature. Our conditioning takes us away from it. One more thing which takes us away from it is living in the past. Too many of us living in the past allow it to affect the present. So this baby doesn't think, oh my God, I'm premature. If I were to think of all the complications, I'm not going to survive till the next day. This baby had learned this incredible art of being in the present moment, having present moment awareness. And that's what makes this baby smile, this incredible bright smile come through. And my hope is that in myself and in others, I would never be arrogant enough to hope, oh, this needs to happen in the world, but maybe in myself and therefore reflecting in the world is to understand that the power of love, the power of compassion is what gives us courage. And to understand, and the hope that everybody will realize this all around us, is that being loving, being compassionate has the power to break boundaries, to save lives, and to make a difference in ourselves and in the world. And this is where my hope lies, that there is hope for humanity. There is courage in love, there is courage in compassion. And I'm definitely very positive and hopeful that this change is already in the process of happening and will continue to happen.
So beautiful. You've left me speechless, Dr. Ron. And that takes a lot because I usually have something to say for everything that I listen to and I hear. I couldn't have said it better myself. I send you my pranams to you, to To your father, to your mother, it's so great that they're with you during this challenging time to take care of you when you're taking care of so many other people, so many babies, so many mothers, so many patients. And I just want to give you my deepest respects and thanks for taking time out of your precious day of relaxation and renewal to come here and share your heart, to share your knowledge, to share your experience. And it is moments like this, sacred moments like this, of love, true compassion, and true understanding that will allow us as a humanity to overcome even this virus, even the economical crisis. Nothing can stand in our way if we recognize this in ourselves and within one another. So I just want to humbly thank you from the bottom of my heart. And I can't wait for us to speak again. And please, I will share the names of your books. I'm sure a lot of people will want to have a look at those. And I myself can't wait to read, especially the book you wrote with your father. And until we meet again, namaste.
Namaste. Thank you so much.